This land is your land, and this land is my land. From California to the New York Island, from the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters, this land was made for you and me. As I went a-walking that ribbon of highway, and I saw above me.
Hello folks, and welcome to Issues of the Day, a program where we take key important issues facing our district, facing our region, and the Commonwealth, and we try to bring in experts so that you, the listening audience, can understand more about these important issues. Today we're going to deal with the Pilgrim Power Plant, and with me I've got two folks who I'll introduce to you, and I want to say the same thing about the both of them before I do. In every community, if they're fortunate, there are advocates who work hard and give of their time, in many cases without any compensation whatsoever. And I'm with two folks here today who have not only given up their time, they've given up their lives to deal with this Pilgrim issue through to the end. So I'd first like to introduce you first to my friend Mary Lambert from Duxbury, and Mary is the Executive Director of Pilgrim Watch. Welcome, Mary.
Oh, thank you. Lovely to be here. Great to have the opportunity.
It's great to have you. And to my left, to your right, is my friend Pine Dubois from Duxbury, from Kingston, my hometown, the director of the Jones River Watershed Association, who does work for the environment on so many fronts, and most recently with Pilgrim. And Pine, thank you for all you do, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Tom. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Mary. Always good to have a conversation with you.
Yeah, and it's good to have Tom in the State House and putting forward legislation this year that it deals with the necessity for emergency planning and other issues that are relevant to public safety, and that's what this is all about in regard to the Pilgrim Nuclear Power Plant.
Well,
so thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Mary, for that kind comment. Let me give you a big picture, because I know these two professionals so well. I know that I may not have much to say after I introduce them. So let me give you just a macro overview of what's going on. The Pilgrim Power Plant was built in 1972. It was built to have a 40-year life. We're now in the 44th year. The clip you just saw from Fox News was an internal clip that was intended to be private, from the NRC to other NRC people. And we in the public got our hands on it through their mistake and learned the truth about what the NRC believes to be the case in that plant. Now, they do intend to close in 2019, I believe, Mary. Is that correct?
Yes. They've announced May 31st, 2019, plug is pulled.
Now, that's fine, except this is 2017, and we've got 2 years to go before it closes, and then it could be a 10-year life for decommissioning. So what happens within those gates is very important to the entire region. Very, very important. And how they operate in the next 2 years before they pull the plug is very important. So I'd like to begin with you, Pine, if I may. And I'd like you to speak to, just for a moment, not too much long, as what is the need for that plant from a demand standpoint, first of all, just a few seconds on that. And then what do you see as the short-term priorities, whether it be safety, security, decommissioning? And Mary, we're going to get to you after that about fuel. Pine?
So, Pilgrim has a contract with the grid. It's the New England grid. So they have a contract with the grid that ends in May 31st, 2019. That's why that date. And they have a contract to supply a certain amount of energy to that grid, which they do. If they were to decide to close today, they would be in violation of that contract, which is what keeps Entergy open. They don't really want to be open, they're losing money. But they have to stay open from an economic point of view. It's the same with this refueling. They're refueling because they have a contract with a company that is bringing in $70 to $100 million worth of enriched uranium fuel so that they can operate until 2019.
I see.
I don't think they want to do that. I don't think the workers necessarily want to do that. but they're stuck. And that's why we want the NRC to act, because we feel like if the NRC said, sorry, too degraded, we can't allow you to act any longer, then, you know, if God is good to Entergy, they can sell the fuel to somebody else and get out of the contract without too much pain. So that's what we would like to see, because we know that in a storm like we experienced on February 8th and 9th, they're offline. Some people were out of power, but they were out of power because a line came down, not because there was not enough power to the grid. So I think it's been proven time and time again over the last several years that Pilgrim is not essential to the welfare of the region. We think it's essential that it close down before an accident occurs and creates a serious problem, not just to the area around Plymouth, but to the entirety of Massachusetts.
Now, I do want to ask Mary in a moment about the recent inspection and what it uncovered. Before I do that, tell me from non-nuclear matters, what is the environmental impact of that plant on that waterway?
So every day since 1972, every time it's operated, it takes 500 million gallons a day out of Cape Cod Bay, runs it through the plant, picks up pollutants inside the plant and discharges it into the bay. I think in that clip we just saw, they was focused on the discharge canal.
Right.
500 million gallons a day is a lot of water. And when it sucks that in, it takes in fish and organisms from the
I
bay.
see.
So that has affected it. And the discharge of radioactive materials below the threshold level, if anybody was looking, and other contaminants, of which there are a half a dozen or more, that affect the bay, as well as heating up the water. So we know global warming is heating up the bay. Our area is heating up faster than any other area on the globe. Adding more hot water to it is not an answer to that.
Okay, thank you. Mary, the memo that was leaked was referring to an inspection that was happening at the time. Can you tell us what the inspection has uncovered?
The inspection showed, number one.
And if I may, that's an NRC inspection.
Yeah, the federal regulators, clearly they are not anti-nuclear.
Right.
And when you hear them say what we have been saying, they said the staff is overwhelmed. You do not want the staff of a nuclear reactor overwhelmed. They said they are not fixing safety systems that they should be fixing. We have noted that they wait because they're losing money. They wait until it breaks to fix it. That's no way to operate a reactor. They said many of the staff didn't appear to know what they were doing. And so it was actually a scathing report, and it's important to note that the regulators only looked at 15% of the safety systems. So if they found that with 15%, what can we assume they would find with 85%? And this is a nuclear reactor. I'd ask you, Tom, how many appliances do you have in your house that are 44 years old?
It reminds me, Mary, of a house that's 44 years old, and everybody who owns a house will sympathize with this. And you plan to sell it in 2 years. How many improvements are you going to make to the house before you sell it? Oh, you may throw some paint on. You may, make sure your shrubs are cut. But the systems, you're not going to make major investments, even though they may be at the end of their life.
Yeah, and that is the problem. And that is why we saw in 2016 alone 18 significant problems with systems in the plant. And the inspectors weren't back in Washington a couple of weeks when we had more problems on the 7th and 8th of February.
Right.
Leaks, perhaps, of salt water getting inside the reactor.
Right.
And salt and steel don't mix.
Now, the NRC has a very elaborate ranking system for each of the plants under its regulatory control. Can you talk about that ranking system and where Pilgrim aligns itself?
Yes,
with that
the
system?
ranking system, put it in simple terms, A, B, C, D, and F. We know that's how to understand it. Pilgrim and 2 other reactors owned by Entergy are ranked as D, degraded, bottom of the heap of 99 reactors operating in the United States. One more level down, and they're forced to be shut. Pilgrim, this isn't a placement that has just occurred. 2013, they joined 20 that were degraded. Then they moved to down and down to 8, to 5, to 3, and that's where they are now. Entergy as a company are not good performers. They have 10 reactors. 40% of them are in one level or another degraded. So they should really find another business, I think.
So did I hear you correctly that within the country there's 3 that have a ranking, let's say, of D,
Yes,
and all 3 are owned
by Entergy.
by Entergy?
Yeah, the other 2 are Arkansas 1 and 2,
Right,
and
there.
then Pilgrim.
Right.
But 40% is not a good indicator of a company and how it is operating.
Right.
And particularly, as you pointed out, they cannot compete here with natural gas, wind, solar coming
Renewables,
on,
right.
renewables, efficiency. So they're losing money. And if you're losing money, that means you're not going to be spending the money.
Right.
And that means when you have an old reactor that requires TLC and it's not getting it, that's a danger sign, a problem for all of us. And it's not just a problem for neighbors of Pilgrim.
Yes.
If something goes wrong with the spent fuel that is being stored on site in a pool and some in dry
Problems.
gas, big problem, the consequences could be an accident that would contaminate an area 3 times the size of Massachusetts. This was determined by security experts at Princeton University, something similar determined by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission of a consequence of a spent fuel accident, and our own Attorney General in 2006 determined that a spent fuel pool fire, which the pool at Pilgrim is vulnerable to, would result in 24,000 latent cancers, 488 billion, that's a B, in damages, and contaminate hundreds of miles.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is an issue of huge concern for here, but for the whole Commonwealth.
Right.
Yeah, and there's no insurance to back that up.
Yeah,
You know, people just lose in that kind of a situation.
Right.
You know,
Right,
those
right.
of us who live close, we're gone, and everything we have is gone too. So, you know, you don't get the federal government coming in with FEMA or anything like that. It's all exempt under these special rules.
Yeah.
So we're in a very difficult period over the next 2 years until the plant is, as you like to say, unplugged. But we have a continuing challenge after that. For those of you who haven't read up on this, the federal government has been collecting money for many years to deal with the spent fuel that is in each power plant, each nuclear power plant from across the country. And the money was supposed to be used to build a singular disposal facility at Yucca Mountain. That facility has never been built. So there is no place for the spent fuel to go. So which of you would like to speak to how the spent fuel is dealt with?
Well, let me just start with a couple of problems. Mary brought up the problem of the spent fuel pool.
Right.
That is overcrowded right now. This is another reason why, you know, Pilgrim doesn't have the capacity to continue to operate without doing something with that.
Right.
In order to get it so crowded, they used, you know, chemistry, and they put Boraflex panels in between all those really hot uranium rods. You know, it's when the fuel is spent from the plant, it's more dangerous, not less dangerous. So you have Boraflex panels in between all of the assemblies, but those are shedding the boron. So they need maintenance. So in order to get that stuff more spread apart, which is the safety feature, so it doesn't boil off all the water and create a hydrogen explosion like Fukushima, they have to offload it into what they call dry casks, and they put those dry casks now outside of the facility. One of our concerns is that it's outside at sea level, when sea level is rising and it's close to the shore where all that salt spray and all that sort of stuff is coming.
Describe a dry
So
cask.
a dry cask is, I'm going to take some wild stabs here, 20 feet in diameter, 200 tons of concrete,
Yep.
and then inside that cylinder, they put a stainless steel container with 60 assemblies of these tiny little rods. So they package the rods together and they put a bunch of those, I can't recall exactly how many, 80 I think, per container.
Yeah, they put 68 assemblies
per container.
And these, what's important, that stainless steel inner that's holding those assemblies, and then you have the outer concrete that's 18 feet tall. The canisters cannot be inspected, and if they crack, they cannot be repaired.
Because they're encapsulated within concrete.
There's just too much radiation. Each cask contains half the cesium-137 that was released in Chernobyl. And that gives you an idea of the huge amount of radioactivity. But it is disturbing that they can neither be inspected, the interior canister, or repaired if something goes wrong.
One more problem I'd like to point out, only because we just got a foot of snow or so outside, is that the way that these canisters breathe, if you will, is a vent at the top and a vent at the bottom.
Right.
Well, when the vent at the bottom is filled up with snow, there's no breathing going on, right? So they have to get out there and they have to
manually,
and I hear it's snowblower time, that kind of thing, which is fine if you have a one-day snowstorm. If you have a 3-day snowstorm, you're going to have a bigger issue. And that's kind of the climate changey problem here. When your storms get more severe and last longer and make it harder for guys to get out when the salt spray is coming on them to do that kind of work, that's when you run into a problem. All looks good on paper. The plan is okay, but it's not implementable. And those are the issues that we have.
Yeah, and another issue is Entergy, no surprise, they're in business, chose the cheapest way to store the dry cask, which is to have the pad where these 18-foot canisters are laid close to the reactor and all lined up. And that presents a security threat.
Yeah.
right.
Because we've sort of referred to them as candlepins bowling for terrorists. And that's an issue. Ideally, we'd like to get that stuff out of there.
Yeah.
But we know, as you pointed out, there is no forwarding address today.
Well said.
But what could be done, if safety and not money were the issue, and if the federal regulators would decide to regulate putting safety first, would be to move storage to higher ground, and at the very least, to put a building over them, or submerge the canisters as they're doing in California.
Submerge them where?
In other words, on higher ground to put
Oh, then
them
put them below.
underground.
Subterranean.
Subterranean.
Which would be
She
a
didn't
greater
mean
protective
in
shelter.
Cape Cod
No,
Bay.
no.
I could tell she did. You'd be jumping off the table.
I would. I think that's the plan, though. I mean, right now, the plan for the canisters, the only plan that we have that's on paper for the canisters comes from 2002. They're going to put them on a ship, take them into the center of Boston, put them on a train, and ship them somewhere.
But there's nowhere to go.
But there's nowhere to go. So there's a lot of work to be done on
Right.
that. My feeling is, don't make it worse. Don't make more.
Right.
You know, because the stuff is so hot when you turn off the key or unplug the unit and start offloading that. You need time for that stuff to degrade
And
before
that's decades, isn't it, before it cools?
Well, it takes forever. I mean, this stuff. I mean, even Yucca Mountain or New Mexico or Texas, wherever. 10,000, 100,000 years. We're not talking anything that we understand. We can't comprehend this.
Now, I'm
stuff.
just curious, given this discussion that there's no end disposal site
Right.
for spent fuel, are we, and I should know this, is the federal government still licensing new nuclear
Yes.
plants?
Yes.
Even though there's no end disposal site for the waste?
Well, they figure they got a problem and it's not going away, so they might as well just, add to the problem.
There's always...
That's horrible.
It is horrible.
There's always the dream that some solution will occur. Now, under President Trump, they're re-looking at Yucca Mountain, and also there's a push for a interim storage site in West Texas.
Right.
And one will have to see, are any of these going to materialize or not? And what is going to be the opposition along the transportation routes? I don't believe Providence is going to be welcoming for the trains going through their city. And cities and towns, et cetera. So in other
It's a
words,
huge problem.
there is a huge problem
Yeah.
and a huge fight in time down the road. And so because Pilgrim only has a few dry casts now, and then they would go to a rapid getting them out of the pool once they close, why not do it right?
Yeah.
Why not put that pad in a higher
hill.
location? What? There are a lot of things
Protect
that
it.
they could do if safety became a priority, and again, if the Nuclear Regulatory Commission fulfilled its charter, which is to protect public health and safety.
Right.
Wow.
So, okay, look at it this way too. If you had a bathtub and it was overflowing, until you fix the drain, wouldn't you turn off the water?
Yeah, right.
So a lot
It's a
of
good
this
analogy.
is common sense.
So what is the decommissioning timeline? I know that you'll pull the plug in 2019, but then how long does the decommissioning actually take?
There are two options. One option that the NRC, the regulator, has given is you can take 60 years to decommission. And the reason for that is the licensee entity and the other owners of reactors have not been forced to put enough money aside to do the job.
But they don't have 60 years in Plymouth.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that's an option they have. However, there's been a change the past few years. A company out of New York, North Star, that has partnered with Areva and a waste company.
Areva's in France.
It's a French company, yes, experienced in nuclear. They've partnered together and decided, we could make a lot of money. A lot of these reactors, these old reactors are closing, and this is a business opportunity. And we have said that we can do this, we don't have to wait till 60 years. If we could take the decommissioning trust fund, the money has been put aside, we could
A
do
lot of money.
it in 10 to 15 years.
Yeah.
And so their first entry is in Vermont,
Right.
Entergy's plan, Vermont Yankee, that they've offered to buy for $1,000. Isn't that amazing? And they
So
have
the-
said they could take that decommissioning trust fund and we could get that site done, clean to a certain level, within 10 to 15 years.
So it's North Star, right?
Yeah.
North Star.
So what is it?
It's an affiliate, yeah.
Okay, so they would buy the plant from Entergy, which I like the sound of because they're in the business of decommissioning plants. Entergy's in the business of running plants. So they would buy the plant for a nominal amount. They would, and then tap into the fund, the money that's been collected by the federal government for many, many years. Is that correct?
Yep.
Or is the closure fund for the plant?
No, it's
No.
the decommissioning trust fund from the plant.
Yeah.
I see, not federal money.
No, no, no.
That's purely for disposal.
Yeah.
So the decommissioning plant, the trust fund for the plant is purely for decommissioning.
And for Pilgrim, North Star has looked at Pilgrim, and they'd be interested if they get approval for Vermont, for Pilgrim by the NRC, and they would also, I believe, have to get approval by the governor.
How much is in that decommissioning fund?
Just short of $900 million,
Okay.
just short. And
And that's sufficient to decommission that plant?
That's debatable.
it's debatable.
But they must feel that.
It
Yeah.
depends, I would assume that they would feel that it is if they're gonna do it. The question is, what's the standard and what does decommissioning mean? And I think of decommissioning, the first time I heard it, I was like, oh, great, we can put anything there.
Right, that's the
Next.
standard, right.
But that's not the standard.
Right.
The decommissioning for the NRC is not a green field, it's a brown field, and it will still have tons of waste on it.
And
So that's a debate, and it's something that we have to become engaged in order to make sure that
It meets a higher
that
standard.
the cleanup, the decommissioning and cleanup, you need both those words, really means a safe environment for the bay and for the people that live around here, and we're not just constantly sending more pollutants into the bay for the next hundreds of years.
Right.
and it's important to understand definitions. Decommissioning is defined as removal of radioactivity to an accepted
Right,
level.
that's what I meant.
Period.
Mm-hmm,
That's all.
mm-hmm.
Who's acceptable level?
Yeah, what is acceptable?
It's not necessarily Plymouth.
Looking at this North Star proposal, it looks really good to get it done quickly, and so Plymouth can have taxable property. And also, hopefully, it would be cleaned up so you wouldn't have runoff, which there will be, into the bay. But there are others that say, look, we've got to watch this carefully because quick, cheap, does that mean quick, cheap, and dirty? Or quick, cheap, and clean? And so we hope that Massachusetts is getting on the bandwagon and defining before any deal or contract
I would say
is
in the
signed,
driver's seat, actually.
How clean is clean?
Yeah, I think, my own opinion of that, having been in the hazardous waste business
Right.
for 30 years, I think the NRC is clearly the authority with respect to running and operating the plants. But the cleanup standard has got to be,
Yeah,
has
and
got to be the purview of,
Well, the state of Vermont,
Of
for
Mass DEP.
example, the state of Vermont said, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission standard is 25 millirem. They put 0.5 millirem,
Vermont did.
Vermont. So the state has the authority to have more conservative standards in place.
I think the
But
legislature actually has to look into it.
But the
I think
state has not gotten into the area yet, and they should, because the contract that North Star signed with
Is a federal standard.
was the federal standard.
I think you will see that, Mary. And the way that it works in the hazardous waste side is we have federal regulations under the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act that we have to meet. The states cannot implement laws that fall below that standard, but they're free to implement laws that exceed that
Exactly.
standard, which Massachusetts does in almost every area. Massachusetts was the first state in the country to declare oil that's been spilled a hazardous waste. In Texas, that was like foreign to them.
Yeah.
They bring that home to feed the
Wasn't that
cows.
money?
Right.
Black gold,
Yeah.
right? Well, it's going to be a very, very interesting time. What is your biggest concern as we sit here in February of 2017?
My biggest concern is a spent fuel pool fire or a terrorist event. Former senator from Barnstable County, Senator Wolf, owns and operates Cape Air, and he has said many times, under 5 minutes, I could put one of my small planes into that reactor and that spent fuel pool, and there would be a fire, and the ball game's over. Over. This is known. And so one could say that Pilgrim is a weapon ready to be set off. And that's not a good sign. And so the sooner that spent fuel is out of that pool,
And
the
converted into gas.
happier I'm gonna be. And
Which-
the safer the Commonwealth is gonna be.
What's your biggest concern, Pine?
I'm concerned every day. I mean, I know that there's ongoing damage being done every single day, and it accumulates. You know that, you know? It could be a storm, it could be terror, as she says, it could be, you know, an accident, it could be somebody that feels like I do this morning going to work, you know? And because of the decrepit nature of the plant, it could be any of that. And it could be without a moment's notice. It could be a nor'easter that puts them out of business. I would like to see the thing closed as soon as it can possibly be closed. It's offline now. I hope it never comes online again. I think it would be a great favor to everyone. And I think it's up to the company Entergy to make that work for its employees. You know, I liked Mary's statement at the NRC hearing the other night. Put the money that you're not wasting into employee retraining and pensions and all of that kind of stuff. Make it work for them. It's going to work for the company. If they get bailed out by a regulator and don't have to operate that thing anymore, great. We get to not have any more fuel on site than we already have, great. We get to start concentrating on the cleanup effort and really buttoning things down so that there's no more contamination of the environment and people aren't getting sick any longer. You heard people at the hearing. Norm was great. You know, people in this area are sick as a result of that. You can't deny it. There have been too many studies. Do we know how many exactly? No, and we never will. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Same with Cape Cod Bay.
Speaking of the NRC hearing last
Yep.
week, which the three of us attended, what were your thoughts on the dialogue? Was it direct? Did you feel like they heard you?
I feel like they probably all went to the bar afterwards, had a drink, and that's the end of it. They had made up their mind.
The NRC
The
representatives.
NRC had made up their mind before they went to the State House and gave a presentation, and before the hearing. The hearing was in response to requests, and thank you, Tom, for joining the lists of federal and our state
Oh, it was a
officials.
long list.
A long, long list requesting that there be a public hearing. So, they responded, they had to. And they sat there, and they had made up their minds, they made their statements, and they listened, and nothing was going to be changed.
It
And
was amusing, or at least it was interesting to hear them. And I appreciate that they did respond directly to the leaked memo. At least they addressed,
Well, as I,
the
you
tone
know,
and tenor of the memo.
they're coming back in March. March 21st, they're going
Right.
to be back here again. I think we have to get ready. And I told them that I really want a meeting with them because I feel like their analysis is really flawed. You know, if you have all cost and no benefit, what are you doing? You know, and that's essentially what they've got. They've got all cost and no benefit. They've put things in such small boxes and stacked them up nice and pretty and said, yeah, we've accounted for everything, you know, except for what we put it on top of. Because we put it on top of is sand, and the next wave that comes in is taking that sand away and all the boxes are going down, you know. And I really feel like there should be an all-out effort by everyone who is concerned in this region, yourself and your cohorts included, you know, to do everything we possibly can to make them shut that thing down early,
Before they refuel,
before they refuel.
which would
We
be
owe it to ourselves, we owe it to our kids.
which would be this year.
Which would be it by May.
Yeah, late
Yeah,
spring.
which would be by May.
And the fact.
2 years early, big
if-
deal.
If they've ordered the fuel is irrelevant because they can
They can
go
sell it to
another
somebody else,
reactor.
right?
No problem.
Right.
As long as they get help getting out of the contract.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the thing. I'm sure there's a contract clause that makes it very expensive for them.
Do we have any indication that they're thinking that way, or talking to anybody about that? Is that a possibility?
I just would keep trying.
You know.
Because I agree with you. I think they'd love to do that as well.
I think they would love to do that. I think they need help to do that, and I think the regulators could play an important role in that, without creating a problem for the rest of the industry. It's like stepping up and doing what you're supposed to do.
I don't know what their contract said.
Yeah,
I've
I don't
tried
either.
to
It's
find out.
priority.
But
I mean-
perhaps you could.
And
Does
just for our
their-
listeners, Mary, just take a step back for a moment. When we say the contract for refueling, in order for the plant to stay in operation, it needs to refuel.
Yeah, a third.
Explain that in the
Uh-huh.
timing of this May versus closure in 2019.
Yes, every 2 years, the fuel inside the reactor core that boils the water to make the steam,
Comes
to
back.
turn the turbines for electricity, it becomes less efficient.
Like an oil in a
Yeah,
car.
after a couple of years.
And more dangerous.
And
Right.
about a third of the assemblies, there are 580 in the core, about a third, about 150 are taken out, put in the spent fuel pool, and eventually they would go to a deep repository
Right.
where they could be poisonous for 250,000 years. That's how serious it is.
Mhm.
Then, new fuel, 150 assemblies, is put in to replace what was taken out, and that lasts for 2 years. And so 2 years is up, and so this spring, there will be what's called the refueling, and 150 new assemblies will go in, and 150 will go in the pool, and some more in the pool to make room will be taken out and put into dry casks.
Well said.
And so that's how it works.
And you were going to say, before I interrupted you, thanks for stepping back and explaining that. So
Right.
what you'd like to see is, rather than them refuel in May of 17, heading towards a closure in May of 19, that the company isn't making any money on this plant.
Mm-hmm.
So the company would likely want to get out now,
Right.
as opposed to 2019.
And-
So we need to work with the regulators to allow that to happen.
So could there be a deal? Can
Well, we've
they
got the right
get-
president.
Can they get out of their contract with ISO New England? Okay?
Right.
Could they get out of that contract if the regulator, NRC, says, oops, we're gonna put you into the bottom F category where you can't operate. So, are they tied to supplying that power, to New England until 2019, depending upon their ability to operate?
So
That's the question.
So if you pull that 15% power off the grid, which is what they're under contract to provide to the grid, if you pull that 15% offline, I know you're going to say that it's offline right now and our lights are still going. But will we be able to deal with the peak periods during the summer?
That's what we have been told, that yes, we can. Conservation Law Foundation has looked at it. A reporter had talked to ISO a couple of weeks ago, and they said, yep,
ISO is the grid.
yeah,
Right.
we can do it.
Yep.
There's not going to be a problem. Fortunately, there has been enough savings in efficiency.
Yeah, which doesn't
and
mean we shouldn't boost
efficient
solar
bills,
and wind.
but
There is.
solar,
But we can make it
wind,
fast.
It's growing every day.
We can do it
natural
fast.
gas. I mean, we can do it.
I go by your house now, your whole front lawn
It
is
took me
is
a
solar.
month. It took me a month to put up solar for my house. 1 month.
Did you assemble it yourself?
No, I had 15 guys working there. There's a lot of jobs in that
Right.
industry. It's a growing industry. It's it's way safer, right?
And it's an industry
it's
that
evolving.
suits our workforce.
Right.
There are over 100,000 jobs in this clean energy
No question.
field. And there are, 600 at best at Pilgrim? And the growing area
That's right.
of clean energy is in the southeast and the northeast.
It's fascinating.
These are jobs.
It's-
This is money.
It's fascinating to me, and this is a little bit of a political commentary, not about nuclear, but it is involved. When we saw the last campaign, we saw coal workers from Ohio, and we saw assembly manufacturers who were all unemployed from Michigan, from Detroit, that were replaced with automation. And you know, they all believe that our new president is going to bring back coal and bring back those jobs. And I'm here to tell you right now, those jobs aren't coming back.
Gone.
If you look at Massachusetts 10 years ago, on the eve of the recession, the governor at that time, Governor Patrick, and the legislature realized that the jobs of yesterday weren't coming back.
Right.
We were not bringing shoe manufacturing back to Brockton.
Right.
We were not going to make fabrics in Lowell and Lawrence. We weren't going to do assembly work down in New Bedford and Fall River. And we invested in 5 or 6 major industries. And we know what a lot of them are: biotech, life sciences, robotics, but green energy.
Right.
Those 5 industries that we invested $1 billion in 10 years ago are all growing at double-digit rates,
Right.
year over year over year. And that's why we have the lowest unemployment rate in the country. And they're not just with low-paying jobs. They're with well-paying, high-tech, STEM-driven manufacturing jobs to replace the assembly work. At the same time, and I'm going to make a point here, at the same time, we've had to adjust our system of higher education to train the young students to fill those jobs of tomorrow, which are now today. And that's why children are staying in Massachusetts and our population is growing again.
Okay.
Now, as you look at the rest of the country, wouldn't you love to talk to the people in Ohio, the governor of Ohio, the governor of Michigan, the governor of Alabama, and say to them, it's not the federal government's job to grow your economy. It's your job to grow your economy. Stop telling people that clean coal is coming back, because it's not coming back.
Yeah.
And look at the electricians that are being put to work in Massachusetts right now, building solar farms.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I was looking at the other day
That's the end of my speech.
that
That was good.
the average wage for clean energy jobs, now this is average, is $57,000 a year, which is above the, 42 or 43?
Yep.
And so it's the way to be. We don't have uranium mines.
Well, we don't have mountaintop coal removal
Yeah,
either,
we don't
thank
have
God.
any of that here.
Right?
That's right.
So use what we have
And
and
we have
use what's
cleaned
the
up our
future.
rivers.
And it helps this country on so many fronts. Puts people to work, reduces our reliance upon fossil fuels, negates the need to build more nuclear power plants, and helps with global warming.
Yeah.
The problem is those industries, as you know, are very powerful lobbyists.
They certainly are.
And that's where the people have to become informed and speak up for themselves.
But it's not helpful when the federal government and this administration tells them that he's going to bring their cheese back. It's not happening. Those coal mines aren't coming back. The reason people lost assembly jobs, good paying assembly jobs in Michigan, is that we pay our people quite well in America. We don't pay them $10 a week. So those jobs that went to China or Mexico aren't coming back because we can't compete with them.
No, it'll be ruined.
And-
No, we can compete with automation.
Yeah,
That was
that's
my
what I
point.
was
That's
gonna
where I was going
say.
next. And the way we did compete is with automation, which cost us those jobs. So, but there are lots of industries out there, as Massachusetts has proven, that can be created in the other 49 states in the country if people understand that. Have you ever read the book Who Moved My Cheese?
No.
Oh, it's a great book. To everybody listening, 70 pages long, big words, lots of pictures, and it's
My kind of
about
book.
people's resistance to change. Those coal miners in Ohio, if they got the skills training to build solar farms, which is not heavy duty training, got the skills training to build farms, would now be in the manufacturing business in a clean field, not in a dirty
And
field.
not very long.
Exactly.
It doesn't take, 15 years to build one of those.
That's
You know
right.
what I mean?
That's right. That's right.
And
It's
they aren't
fast.
expensive
No.
to build.
For the first time in a long time, I've seen an alignment, a synergy between economic development and clean energy. It's really, on so many fronts, been a bonus for our state. I can tell you this, and the speaker said this a couple of weeks ago. When we go to legislative conferences throughout the country, people come up to us. It doesn't matter if you've been in the legislature for a month or for 20 years. They come up to us and they want to know, why are you doing this? How did you do that? This is really cool. You're building this industry, you're building that technology, you're investing in this for education. You know, what's the plan? And they want to know.
Yeah.
And if you look at legislation that's passed throughout the country, it models Massachusetts legislation. So the work you've been doing in clean energy and in dealing with this nuclear problem, I don't want you to, for a moment, think it's gone unnoticed. We get the privilege, the benefit of going to other states around the country and even other countries, and they want to know who the brain trust is in Massachusetts, because it certainly isn't us in the legislature. It comes from people like you. You've done
Yeah,
some
well,
great
that's
work.
nice to say. And we enjoy working, with the legislature, clearly.
We're going to be wrapping up in just 5 minutes. So you've got folks from all the surrounding towns. What are your final thoughts on this? And what would you like to say to them? And how would you like them to engage? I think from this conversation, they understand the real risks. They understand the importance of this work. They understand what's needed to do this in an orderly and safe way. But do you need people to get involved?
Yeah, actually, I can say it in a few.
We have
Few
5 minutes,
words.
go right ahead.
Better to be active today than radioactive tomorrow.
Wow.
And that's it.
And you looked right in the camera when you said that.
And that's it.
Right? And so how can people get involved?
People can get involved by attending meetings. There's a meeting, public meeting that the regulators will be at, the public can speak, which will be the annual assessment by the regulator of Pilgrim. And it's the perfect opportunity. It will be in Plymouth at the 1620 Hotel.
The old Radisson.
Yeah, and
Well, previous
on
Radisson.
March 21st. The papers will have announcements, and it's an opportunity for you to give your assessment
Well, and I think
and your concerns.
And I think before then, because that's a month away or so, go to your own town hall and ask your selectmen to go, or to send your, KEMA or, your emergency management guy or your fire department guy down there and speak up. It gets boring for everybody to listen to the same people all the time. I think everybody's got concerns and everybody's got a voice, and we all should be using it now, I think more than ever. Working with the environment, working for your kids, it's about them at least as much as it is about us. We can conserve, we can save energy, we can do things smarter, and I think it's up to all of us to do that.
And we can also be supportive of legislation at the State House.
I think so too.
Emergency planning is a big, big issue.
It is.
And Representative Calter and some other representatives put an important bill out. The federal government does not require Entergy to pay one dime for emergency planning expenses once they close. However, until that spent fuel pool is emptied, the risk is there.
That's right.
So we need emergency planning. And why should your town, Kingston, Plymouth, Duxbury, etc., have to take that out of their pocket? It's the presence of the reactor. It's their responsibility, and they should continue to pay. And this bill that Representative Calter has put forward is something you should support, because you want to assure that, God forbid, if something happens and your children are at school, that your town's emergency management and the state's emergency management have been able to train, have been able to get equipment, can do the job to take care of your children.
Well, Mary, as usual, you're wonderful. I love your passion, and I'm grateful to all that you do. And
Hey, listen, we're grateful to you.
so grateful for all of you do.
Thanks for
Folks, thanks for joining us. If nothing else comes out of these episodes, I would hope that you would engage. I think that's the name of the game. You know, they say that in this time of the internet, people don't engage because there's so much information, it's like drinking water from a fire hose. You can't get it all. And sometimes people retreat because they can't get it all. We've got some very important issues facing our region. We've got the Rotary in Middleborough that's got to be built. We've got Mont Ponce Pond that's got to be cleaned up. We've got Silver Lake that's got to be replenished and preserved. And we've got the nuclear power plant. Those just to name a few. Get involved, please. Read all you can read. Call the people who are giving up their time and their talents to help us in each of these important areas. And don't think that it's going to be okay because somebody else is working on it.
Right.
You need to be involved. You are that person. So I thank you for joining us. We're going to talk in a week or two from now about the big news happening with Mont Ponce Pond and some regulatory changes that are on the horizon to clean up that pond. I'm very pleased with the way the negotiations have gone, and we'll share that with you next show. Thank you so much.
As I went a-walking that ribbon of highway, and I saw above me that endless skyway, I saw below me that golden valley. This land was made for you and me.